Welcome back to Builders of the Broken Bazaar. I'm your host, Dr. Tabish Zaman. Now, generally on this podcast, we talk a lot about system. But before we begin today's conversation, I want to reflect on something which is very obvious to all of us, and that has changed the way the world understands itself every minute. Around 500 hours of videos are uploaded on YouTube. TikTok users collectively watch more than 1 billion hours of content every single day. And Instagram alone now hosts over 2 billion monthly users. I won't talk about ChatGPT. We built the largest information system in human history. And yet, despite this constant flow of information, trust, which is very important, continues to fall. And according to some of the reports, fewer than 4 in 10 people globally say they trust the news most of the time. And in some countries, that number is closer to 1 in 3. So we find ourselves in a very, very strange situation. We are surrounded by more information than any society in history. But understanding often feels further away than ever. Complex conflicts, they are reduced to headlines. Corporate influence disappears behind technical language, and political decisions, they appear as isolated events rather than being a part of a larger system. And when that happens, something important begins to disappear. And I'm talking about context, talking about memory, and more importantly, the connection between the events. And without those connections, power is very difficult for us to see. Because before system collapses, something else usually fractures first. The story we tell about how the world works. And somewhere inside that noise, something interesting has actually started happening. Again, if you're paying attention, a new generation of storytellers has emerged. Not inside newsrooms, not inside universities, or not even broadcast studios, but on the very platform that were originally designed for entertainment and connection. TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, you name it. And people who take complicated ideas, I say complicated, but geopolitics, lobbying network, corporate power, and try to build context of millions of viewers who feel something is missing from that official explanation. And sometimes they do this with nothing more than a humble camera and willingness to ask difficult questions. And today's conversation sits right inside that shift. Because my guest today has spent his hard years trying to rebuild something that has been missing in this. Connor. Connor, known as Riverwand, is an independent investigative storyteller and a digital educator whose work has now reached, again, if I'm making justice to his numbers, but thousands and thousands of followers across TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Again, over 10 million likes on TikTok alone. He produces deep dive investigation into geopolitics, corporate lobbying, and what researchers increasingly call techno-nationalism, the growing fusion of state power and technology cooperation. But he does something unusual. He slows things down. His videos often trace the deeper history behind the current event, the network of lobbying that shape policy, and the corporate interest, which are embedded inside our geopolitical conflicts, the structures that rarely appear in the headline that quietly shape the world we live in. And he does it largely outside traditional media institution, which means the work carries its own tension. Now, algorithm, it can hide months of research overnight. Content exploring sensitive political topics can be demonetized or suppressed. And independent creators, they often work without any legal protection. They don't have any editorial teams or financial stability that journalists once relied on. Yet, despite those challenges, at least in Connor's case, his audience keeps rising. Not because he offers certainty, but because he offers something which, again, is so rare in the current time. And that is time. Time to unpack complicated issues, time to connect across history, and time to ask those difficult questions that don't fit neatly into a headline. It's a form of public education, I would call it, and perhaps even a kind of public intellectual. Connor, what an honor to have you. Welcome to Builders of the Broken Bazaar.
Appreciate that. Welcome. I'm excited to have a conversation.
Thank you so much. So let's get into this. I've got so many things to ask you and talk to you. And I want to begin with the whole notion as to how the information actually stops adding up. When we look at some of the numbers over the last decade, the structure of information has changed so dramatically. In your country alone, more than 60% of the people now say they get their news from social media rather than the traditional media outlet. And at the same time, the events that unfolds in front of us through newspapers or television, they're all fragmented in clips, posts, and threads. We see the events, but we don't see the structure behind it. And your work seems to begin exactly at those moments when people recognize that explanation they're being given is only a part of the story. So take us through that moment when, for the first time, you felt those stories explaining those politics doesn't satisfy you, and you realize that people were hearing the world. They're missing those deeper structures of power.
Yeah, I think it really started for me with education. I wouldn't say that when I was younger I was very well educated. Like I didn't graduate high school because I didn't value learning. I went to continuation school and then but I did graduate. I ended up kind of as my life fired, I started to have a more priority in learning. I started to become more competitive with my learning instead of just treating it as something I have to do. I took it as something I want to do. And then I started the journey going back to college. So I went back to college and ended up graduating from a 4 year university with a degree. And then that was right around the time of COVID. And
Mhm.
I think I spent a lot of time during COVID diving into kind of the history of the United States. And another very important piece to all of this conversation is friends. Having friends from different parts of the world allowed me to have a different perspective. I wouldn't be who I am without people from different regions of the world that are willing to be patient with me and have conversations where I might be reluctant or I might be sometimes in the beginning, very often in denial about, especially the United States, what they have done to the rest of the world. And a lot of these people are coming from, they're part of a diaspora of many different people who have been displaced by the United States. So these, having these longer conversations with me allowed me to kind of open up my mind. And once I started, when you care about people, you're willing to learn about them as well. So I started to read more and read about the Middle East, read about, like I said, a big part of my like advocacy started during Black Lives Matter.
Mhm.
And that's when I kind of really started to learn more about just how violent we have been physically as a country, but
Mhm.
also policy wise. I think that's what a lot of people miss out on. And that's something that was lost on me. Is sometimes the violence isn't seen. It's more kind of what's happening behind the scenes and what's being written in the laws rather than just the violence in the streets. So I think really for me it just took a long time. It just took people I would say it really took people willing to talk to me, the people that care about me, and it boiled down to my education.
I mean, the way we look at this again is in terms of how you mentioned COVID. That was a big reset in your journey. Again, is it about the event we are talking about, or was it a process which you went through? And again, this is quite a big shift as far as who you are, the country you represent, and what this country has in terms of its history. So, again, you mentioned Black Lives Matter. Again, for a lot of people, that was a sort of a spark which spread out on roads, in different institutions. We saw disturbances, and again, what was covered in the news as well. But it gives me an impression that you're looking at it from a processual point of view, that it was a process where you connected the dots. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yeah, I would say it started as a spiral of I still very much do this today is I listen to both sides. So I will watch Fox News and then I'll watch some sort of liberal media, not that I really consider them too off from Fox News, but I'll watch how they're talking about conversations and I'll find truth in between them,
Mhm.
or I'll find truth more often than not. It'll be littered in what they're saying, but the way the storytelling or how they're describing scenarios that have played out are not true. So I have to it led me down to every time I was watching something, every time I was listening to something, I ended up thinking, okay, well, where does this come from? Why? Like a simple example of this could be, why don't we have public transportation in the United States?
Mhm.
And if you watch Fox News or if you watch CBS or CNN, they'll give you a conversation of not what's happening. I'm
Mhm.
trying to think of what they would basically say, that like taxpayer dollars are going toward that. The state is too slow. It takes processes too long. If it's Fox News, they're saying Democrats are holding it up. Democrats will say Republicans are holding it up. They don't really want this. But it really comes down to people that are pushing um, our politicians to not do public transportation, and it's people that are own car dealerships. It's people that own parking lots. I mean, are the United States has the most parking lots in the world. It's people that do car insurance, health insurance, all these different things. People are lobbying our politicians to push to make sure that we're not having the real conversation of how to live a better life with something like public transportation, which would benefit almost every single person in this country. So it's really it came down to me on figuring out why these things are happening. And that's kind of like where my deep dive started.
But the problem with this is, and again, I say problem in a very pragmatic way, because when you watch any news, and again, either side, the liberal media or the far right, whatever that is, it does cover quite a bit in terms of the topics. So, how did it dawn upon you? I mean, were you looking at it one by one, or did it just happen to be like you saw that connection straight away? And when you come to our world or this side of the world, in terms of the academia, and again, the reason I bring that up is, there's so much learning going on, there's so much writing, there's so much research going on, but people are still not looking at that side. People are still not questioning, despite all the evidence out there. But in your case, obviously, you're very young, I suppose, and you've come fresh off your college, and you're looking at some of these things. So was it a particular story, or was it a case where you were just disenchanted by the whole narrative which was going around you?
Yeah, I think it comes down to figuring out how to make changes, kind of what
Mhm.
to push for. The question is, we want public transportation. I grew up in the Bay Area. We have BART. I'm going to stay on that idea, is because it's easy for me to understand and it's something that seems simple. But for public transportation, the way I started to learn more about it is, I want to make a change. If you want to make a change, you have to understand what you're trying to change. So if
Mhm.
they're telling you we can't have public transportation because of this,
Mhm.
then okay, well, let me look into that and see what kind of messaging, what can I talk about, what can I learn,
Mhm.
and then you start to realize that what they're saying is not true, and then it kind of leads you down. Once you find one domino,
Mhm.
everything will fall, because you sh- you find one thing that's not true, or you find one thing where they're kind of putting up a facade. The
Mhm.
curtains just start to fall, because you will see different pieces that start to be like, okay, so there, why is, why are we allowing money into our lobbying? Like, why are we
Yes.
allowing this to happen for public transportation? Okay, well, how does the healthcare system work? Why are they pushing money from the healthcare system onto the automotive industry? So
Yeah.
now you're reading about healthcare. And so it really just comes down to, like, when you want to learn something, the other thing that is very important in this conversation is the ability to have the time. So I have been very lucky in my life in terms of my family. I don't come from great wealth or anything, but my family was comfortable growing up. I would say very upper middle class, and understanding that I was capable of making a bunch of mistakes and still
Hmm.
feeling comfortable. I think that is very important. Like, the ability of the time that I've had to learn, a lot of people aren't given that opportunity. So while I'm doing these deep dives, somebody could be having to work two jobs. So they might not have the opportunity to do the deep dives that I'm doing. And I think I would hope those people will take an opportunity to look into my work and things like that. But I think the conversation really also has to be around that people's time is so limited because of the system that we're in. It doesn't allow people to really learn a ton about the world we live in. And I think that's set up in a specific way.
I think that gives us a good insight of how you've come around and how you've built yourself. That was very good for our audience. Now let's talk a bit about Riverwand, your tag.
Okay.
Yeah. The way it has emerged, of course, we are talking about the same platform which we all use, and the way you have leveraged it. Again, it is competing against the likes of major news organization. The way those information, those reels, those communications are being created. I mean, again, says that in terms of millions of views per video. Um, and your work, and through your platform, it sits right in that landscape. So my question to you here is how or what pushed you from that observer, from observing everything, reading everything, and then going into that public platform space where you were willing to investigate and then talk about those stories so openly, so bravely as well. That comes across so strong in whatever you say, whatever you do across different subjects.
I would say for me, there was a point in my life once again during COVID, I suffered great loss.
Hmm.
So I lost a family member, and
Sorry to
that
hear.
family member was someone who pushed me like to my educational limits to
Hmm.
question myself, whether it be the idea of like understanding manhood or understanding um being white in America, understanding kind of my existence. And so she very much pushed me to
Hmm.
learn all of these things. And she was a very big advocate for Black Lives Matter, for women who were pushed from homes, single mothers advocating for home ownership, like all of these different various things. She was very vocal in communities, like local communities, worked with charities. And so when I lost her, I mean, I spent some time alone for a few years, and then my work is an extension of her.
Hmm.
I Everything that I've started in creative had been with the idea of continuing her work. So I would say that's something that has I mean that's the basis of it. That's my founding start.
And that sees you grow. And again, there's a very strong inspiration there. But clear it for us. When we look at you on TikTok or Instagram or through whatever communication you do very effectively, I don't want to label you, I don't want to give you a tag, but tell us, do you see yourself as a content creator, or do you feel closer to journalism that way? Investigative journalism, if that's a word which exists in today's world.
It's something I struggle with figuring out my work. Sometimes I consider myself as a content creator. You try to be more funny. You
Yeah.
try to be something that people are willing to watch, entertaining enough. And but then it can also get in the way of like this aspect of humor doesn't often fill in with journalism because a lot of the conversations can be very serious. So I don't know. I just consider myself a person on the internet having conversations, kind of like existing in the world I'm currently in. I do think that I do deep dives on things. I think some of my work can be considered journalism, whether it be connecting dots or kind of like using a lot of public information, articles, and putting them together to create a story or a narrative that I think of the direction that we're going. And a lot of my like something that is super important is the conversations that I try to have are built around history. So,
Mhm.
like using the Iran conflict right now, most of my conversations moving forward will be built around our involvement in Iraq. Like, and to me, that's a very important starting point of just piecing things together because it will give you like the US has not changed a lot, especially since Iraq. So, like, and a lot of the times you'll see the same names that will pop up that were the people who were doing diplomacy in the Middle East during the Iraq time are the
Yeah,
same people that are doing diplomacy now. So to me, the like putting those things together,
yeah,
and you might be able to call it journalism, but once
yeah,
again, I think I just kind of bounce around. I do
yeah,
wish I had a firmer stance on my platform sometimes, but
yeah.
uh my mind is all over the place. So I'm just kind of going with what I got.
You've put it very simply, and again, that's your humility which is talking here. But there are two things here which I really want to get into. In my short time of what I'm trying to do and my interest with the social media, what I see is that two types of creator or two types of personalities which come across on social media. You've got the parrots and you've got the practitioners. The story you've told me about, people having that influence on you, how you've come across, how your realization in terms of education. And again, some of those people around you shaped your thinking and ideas, and you said your extension of work as well. I see people engaging with you, on your platform, and that engagement is not light at all. So, we are really moving fast, and that word practitioner on social media really sticks to you. Again, that is not a label I'm giving you, that is your work talking about. But for you, was there a moment when you realized, okay, now there is real engagement? And I don't mean likes or shares and stuff like that, but the discussion you're having with people on topics you're talking about, for example, if Iraq war or even now Iran war that way, when you see people coming up to you and talking serious stuff, getting into the deep dive of what you say, what does it make you feel? And how do you see that in terms of, again, your role, your identity?
I think my platform hasn't really changed my life. Like in
Okay.
terms of like everyday life.
Hmm.
So like in terms of like I've met a lot of incredible people that have changed my life, but I'm talking more like something that you can feel in a monetary value or something that you can that's more tangible, I would say. So like for me, I would be having the conversation whether I had 10 followers or a million. I think there's no my push is education because I'm still every day I educate myself on the topics that are happening around the world. So
Hmm.
like I don't at the end of the day my only goal is to continue educating myself and I will spread that conversation to the people that follow me.
Hmm.
I would s- People who have reached out to me and been I mean that's really been the biggest difference to me is when people will send me messages
Hmm.
saying they appreciate me having the conversations or appreciate my work. To me, that's all I can ask for.
Hmm.
That's like it makes me feel very good hearing those conversations and having those conversations. And I wouldn't say I get everything right. I definitely get
Yeah.
things wrong. I used to get when I first started doing all of this. I used to get a lot more things wrong.
Hmm.
I used to do just kind of like fast takes and I wouldn't do a deeper dive, but I started to have more respect for the work and more respect for the people. Um, but yeah, the importance of the audience is really only that I'm just using the power that I have. Once again, I mean, it's not often that you see a white man having very leftist or strong opinions when it comes to the conversation on the Middle East and understanding how liberation and the fight that they've had more often than not stemming from the United States. So I think it's probably different than what people are used to seeing, which is an amplification of my platform. So I would say that benefits me in a sense, in a way that I think it almost shouldn't, because the people from that people should be listening to the people from that part of the world when to hear their struggles, but sometimes it's kind of a I'm just doing my best to try to voice their thoughts and stuff. So
But each story which you do, each topic you talk about, and each discussion which you have on either of those platforms, and coming from a research background, I can tell you, it takes a lot. It takes a lot, sometimes months, weeks, days, so however you want to add up. But before you put it out there on a public platform, it shows the kind of research intensity which you're putting into. And especially when we are talking about high powers, we're talking about institutional layers. And you have explored issues like techno-nationalism, Silicon Valley's influence on geopolitics, which is at the heart of what this podcast stands for, and something which triggers me heavily in terms of the corporate lobbying networks, which again is right there in terms of this across the pond as well here in the UK. So the question for me would be if you could again for us show us what that research process would look like in actual practice when you don't have any support whatsoever, you don't have any hands which are doing any back end work for you. It is just one person, one man army that way.
yeah, I think when it comes to like more the stuff that you're talking about is more what I talk about on YouTube.
Hmm.
Because those are deep dives. I'm doing a lot of research when it comes to those. I'm having to watch interviews, and the thing about the oligarchs, the
Yes.
techno-nationalists, the people that feel the strongest about their views don't hide their views or their values.
Mm.
There's a reason why most of these people are in the positions of power that they are, and it's because they are more often than not ruthless, and they also don't have a large sense of understanding the situations that they live in. So they are not in touch with how normal people live in society. And
Mhm.
a large part of that is because most of them come from real wealth.
Yeah.
And so they don't shy away from the things that they do. They say them in public places, whether it be their speeches or articles that they're involved in or they're writing or people are interviewing them. The hard part is going through them.
But
A
do you
lot of
think that
these,
makes your life easier that way when doing
yeah,
that
it
research?
does for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, I would say it's not personal, but it is
Mm.
personal because a lot of these people are pretty insufferable when it comes to the conversations that they're having because of how they don't exist in the reality that most of us live in.
Yeah.
So they when they're talking about it, I'm just taking notes, and then I take the notes, and then I start to connect it to different people, different conversations, different whether it be companies, if they're having the conversation around specific money moving around or how their view is on certain sectors or parts of the world. More often than not, it's the Middle East that they're kind of
Mhm.
bashing, and you can usually figure out where that starts.
Yeah.
You can also figure out who's in their group, and that will also tell you if there's someone in their group, you can listen to them, and you are who you are around. So, like, if I'm hearing them have these conversations, it's pretty easy to understand that if these two are spending a lot of time together, you can you can figure out that they're probably on the same page. So, it's like you're saying, it really comes down to connecting the dots and
Yeah.
understanding, kind of the mentality of these people is also an important part.
Yeah. But does that not scare you in any way? In any way. And I mean, of course, you are on this journey where you see the clarity in front of you. But at any point in time, does that not? Because we're not just talking about people, we're talking about institutions. We're talking about, that connection between different powers across different landscape. Don't you feel that this could come back at you at some point? And
Absolutely.
yes, that makes you human.
All of this scares me. I think listening to the people have conversations, reading about it, understand there is a level of sometimes I wish I could go back and not know anything because it starts to really affect the world that you live in, the conversations you have. And when I put a lot of these videos out, it is sometimes targeting some of the wealthiest, most powerful people in the entire world. So if
Mm-hmm.
my videos start doing well and I see, hundreds of thousands of views, I have to assume at some point they're going to see it. And I think the fact that I've been on the internet for 3 years now, I don't know if I'll be able to ever find like a corporate job at a massive, or I'm not that I really have any interest, but I think that I will be ousted as
Yeah.
someone who is not probably hireable, and I think it definitely will impact my life, probably for the rest of my life. I hope my morals and values will hopefully also benefit me from maybe other people wanting to bring me on and help me with their work, but yeah, I think it definitely has a real life impact for sure.
Yeah. I mean that again. I wanna talk about this a bit more, but I wanna just slightly go back in terms of your process when doing hours of research. And it is such an interesting conundrum because when I draw that parallel to what we do in terms of the research, our objective is when we are writing a paper or when we are conducting a piece of research, we want as many eyeballs on them. We want as many citations. We want as many people to read them. And again, you want the same thing. But given the sanitized space we work in, academia, we are under so much of risk assessment. We do all those ethical approvals and all of that. But you don't have that protection. You don't have those, layers above you or below you in any way, which makes you vulnerable. And which is why, it is such a great addition for me to have you on this podcast because this is about this. This is about looking at research from a very different perspective and doing it against all odds. And you're giving us that process as well, Connor. But again, I just want to look into a bit more. I don't want you to give away your secrets that way. What is your process or what is your method? Because I know you worked extremely hard. But again, drawing that parallel to my own research, to our own research, we say, okay, this is our research aim and objective. This is what I want my audience or my reader to get from this paper. So that is a theoretical contribution or that's a methodical contribution. When you do a video, what is going through your mind? Is it about the number of views? Again, how do you define that impact?
I would when I'm making a video, it starts with what I find interesting. I mean, it comes down to like I said, the I have to sit through hours. I'll read autobiographies.
Mm,
I'll listen to their interviews. I have to read papers. It has to be something that I find interesting as well. And my only goal is that I hope other people also find it interesting. So now I do take the editing aspect of it. I do try and make it entertaining. So once again, I'm pulling from other people's work and people that I have watched for many years that
mm,
I'll say I really like their work. How can I implement their style or their editing or whatever it is that they do into mine?
mhm,
So I think it's a mixture of doing the research and kind of sitting it down, looking at it and saying, what is the story here? What All of these things are very interesting. when they're separated, but when you connect the dots, what kind of story can I tell? And I
Hmm.
mean, I'm still working on that. Storytelling is the hardest thing to do. Having a conversation and keeping people entertained, wanting them to care and making them believe that what you are saying is important enough for them to watch or to listen to the entire thing. I mean, it's hard, especially with our attention spans nowadays. And I
Seven
will also say
seconds.
that I went to school for psychology. So I also have like a research background of, reading research papers, writing meta-analysis, and it played a part in my understanding of how to do research for sure.
So you apply those frameworks pretty well that way. But
Yeah,
that's
I
not
would
the.
I mean,
Yeah.
research papers, like when you have to read about the papers, yeah, you're definitely you just when you've read papers like that and kind of like the amount of information, the information overload of the the analysis of everything. I mean, it's different than just reading an article on a newspaper or something like that. It
Hmm.
requires a little bit more understanding and patience.
Yeah.
So now, I mean, I wouldn't say that like I have a very scientific, specific way of doing all my research, but I try my best. I mean, I really do.
Yeah. And I think that's a lesson for us as well in terms of how we evolve, looking at, how we tell our story. And again, but that's not the only hurdle, Connor, isn't it? Because let's say you've done your story bit, you have framed it all. The world we are living in at the moment, we are talking about digital platforms because they primarily operate as gatekeepers of information. And again, coming back to your point, a very small number of companies, and I could name them Meta, Google, they are controlling that algorithm, which basically determines what people see, and billions of people see every day. And those algorithms, they basically operate according to the rules which are completely invisible to you and me, likes of you and me. So you've spoken about investigation, and again, investigation flagged up, which we see again a lot of the other creators as well when they explore those controversial topics. So what happens when you feel, and what's your feeling when months of work you're suddenly hit with that brick wall, and it is so not ready? And you mentioned monetization as well. How do you overcome that? And is there a constant thought going on in your head about that? Because there's another hurdle to cross.
Yeah. So I'll say the monetization part. I don't the only reason I want to have some form of monetization or is because I want autonomy.
Yeah.
I don't want to have implications about the things I say. I prefer to work from a background of the people that listen to me, the people that watch me are the people that support me. And it allows me to also create stories that I think are important that maybe some people don't want to touch or they can't talk about because their work or family or things like that. I prefer to be a person who can exist on their own. And I mean, I have a job now and I'm the goal, like when I talk about having the monetary means to be on my own. I think that's the goal of most people is to be able
Mm.
to do what they want, what they love, and be able to do it full time. So, I mean, to me, that for the monetary part, that's definitely why I think and talk about that.
But have you had a piece of work which you have seen effectively punished because of the subject it explored, or it was controversial? I mean, again, everything is controversial these days, and which is why they don't like the troublemakers. And I bracket you and me in that category. But have you had anything like that?
Yeah, on YouTube, I've had videos demonetized because they'll say that the way YouTube works is the advertisers that basically give money to YouTube, they'll say whether they want to advertise on this video or they'll opt out if it has specific scenes. And like in one of my videos, I had a scene that involved 9/11. It
Mm.
wasn't anything crazy. It was more just the people that were talking about 9/11 while it was happening, the news reports that were coming out. I wasn't showing any anything crazy.
Yeah.
But because of that, my video got demonetized. And then there's another one that said that I think it said I was bullying someone, but it was because, I mean, I was talking about a billionaire. Like, I don't really know how much I could bully a billionaire. So that also had an impact. But when I think about the algorithm and I think about things that are shadow banned, that is what a lot of people call it, I don't give it much thought.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
if when you make content, it's at this point, it's never about it's never about the video that you're gonna put out, it's the next one. Like,
Mm.
you can't just make one video and your life is set. So, like, if I put in a lot of effort and a video doesn't do well, does it suck? Absolutely. But I'm also, like, I'm on to the next.
Yeah.
I'm it's there's so many things to talk about. There's so many things to do that I really can't get lost in, like, specific numbers of videos.
And it goes on that roller coaster up and down that way, isn't it? But it tells me one thing. It tells us, and again, I'm taking a lot from this conversation, when you're dealing with this kind of tension, when you're dealing with this kind of, paradox where I am trying to put out a piece of information which I feel is truthful, but then the system or the platform is pushing it out against me in terms of trying the whole narrative that let's be all comfortable in that bubble, and whoever is trying to poke that bubble is getting punished in whatever way that is happening in front of us. But you've been very persistent, Connor. You've been very, very persistent. Now, if I talk to you about your work specifically in terms of technology companies and state power. And again, this is something which I'm interested in as well. You've seen how major technologies or the firms operating these days, they've become very, very embedded in national security infrastructure. And here in United Kingdom, one thing which is plaguing me quite a lot, because I did my research, early years in terms of the digital transformation within the healthcare. So
Mhm.
NHS, if you come over to this part of the world, you'd realize NHS is basically like a sacred cow. I mean, we cannot touch that. There have been more than 15 major transformation programs within the NHS, and we are still having those issues in terms of how it operates. The budget is way over the limit, and nothing seems to work. People are very dissatisfied with how it's going on. But then this question about the technology firms, Palantir, for example, they basically provide the data analytics platform, which are again used by intelligence agencies, military institution, and border security system across multiple countries. We know that. We know that. So when you follow these trails between tech companies and political lobbying, because the question is, how did they get in there? How easily they got in there? Tell us from your experience, what sort of patterns have you noticed with this kind of embedding of companies like Palantir?
Yeah. I think you're kind of on to exactly why I talk about these things. The involvement of Palantir in the NHS is actually something I've covered in one of my videos. It is just a push to, in my opinion, it's a mass surveillance push. So
Yeah.
it's a getting massive amounts of information to build out a platform or an algorithm or a database on specific people that span across countries. And if you to understand how Palantir works is a very simple way is thinking about the Palestinians
Yeah.
in terms of Israel knows all of the Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and in Gaza. They have a registry system of every citizen, and Palantir is what helps them run those systems.
Hmm.
Like the if you look at how the Palestinians have been treated and you look at the type of surveillance systems, whether it be the checkpoints that they have with, you know, cameras all over the West Bank, all over Gaza, all over these areas with autonomous weapons at these checkpoints. All of these things are systems that they are pushing for.
Yeah.
And once again, it's not something that they hide. When you look at experiences like the police, when the United States police go train with Israel, they talk about how amazing or how incredible the Israeli surveillance is of the Palestinians and how they're to watch and take down any insurgencies that are going to happen before they happen. All of those things are happening because they have these surveillance systems.
Hmm.
And Palantir is in a very strong position because they have a lot of people in the industry. I mean, there's like so much to this conversation because there's the revolving door, which
Yeah.
is people that used to work in the government go to then work for private companies.
Yeah.
And then those people that are now working for the private companies still have the connections in the government. So they're able to basically call up their old friends and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a government contract," or they call it's just the amount of lobbying. I've made a video about this talking about it saying that that's something that should not be happening in the United States. And there's just like a there's also this I mean, we don't even have the full like understanding of the Epstein files,
Yeah.
but Peter Thiel is very much in those, which Peter Thiel is the owner and founder of Palantir. So like I think there's more to these connections than we really even know about right now. But yeah, the NHS and our healthcare, all of these things are being pushed together to create some sort of system to bring people all of our information into one thing. And the main point of that is you could make the argument and say, why is that bad? If there's a lot of information, if everyone's information is together, it'll make it easier for if I take a trip to the UK and I get injured there and they have access to my information from the United States, that could be something that is very good.
Yeah.
The problem they're not using our information in that way. They are not First of all, they're leaking our information. I mean, they lose our information all the time.
Yeah.
And these private companies are sharing, I mean, been sued. Multiple companies have been sued multiple times for sharing our information across. We share our information with Israel. They leak information to different countries. It's not something that's protected, and we're not seeing the benefits of it. We're
Yes.
not seeing the financial benefits in terms of lowering prices in the United States for our healthcare or anything like that. If the process is going to be so much easier, then it should be cheaper.
Cheap.
But it's cheaper for them. It makes their lives easier. It makes them more profitable. But that profit never comes back to the
Stillness.
everyday citizen.
Yeah. And you're spot on there. You're spot on there. And this is where I make an argument in a couple of papers which I've spoken about the adoption of digital transformation. For me, one of the biggest resistance when it comes to AI, of course, we cannot ignore what's in front of us. But the question I am asking, and the question I want to ask loud and clear, is can someone explain to me the premise on which the previous digital versions we are talking about 1.01 or 2.03 and 4 has those promises been fulfilled, or have those promises been fulfilled in any way? And the answer is an overwhelmingly no, because it has not impacted healthcare, it has not impacted poverty, education, but all it has done is created a mechanism of extractive capitalism. Again, that is a whole thing altogether. But we are talking about how that is pushing the capital, the extraction upwards, and people in the middle and at the bottom, they're not benefiting at all. And in the United Kingdom, we had this a few months back. In fact, last year we were talking about the digital ID thing, which was thankfully which was scrapped. And people would ask, what is wrong with that? What is wrong with that? And I think you summed up that pretty well as to how this data is being handled by a group of people. sitting above us, and how they leak, how they sell, how they misuse, how they abuse. And again, it can all be drawn parallel to what Palestine is facing. That is the biggest window we can see as to how data is being used in terms of these big organizations. So let me now take you to your you know you talk a lot about your work. Actually tells me a lot about the self defense of this digital self defense you talk about. I mean, your work is all about digital literacy. And so many people around us, they are unaware how technology companies over the years have been storing that data. And sometimes, 10, 20 years, personal search history, location data, all the files on your movement and location. And some of these platforms, they retain these data for years before you and me can actually remove it. And again, you have used your platform, isn't it, to show how audience can access that and delete that data. So what motivated you to talk about this as well? Because this is very important, very, very important, especially people in the developing world as well, who are learning the ropes of new technology and excited by the prospect of it and how the data is used.
Yeah, I think when it comes to data, the question is why do they want it and how does it help me?
Mm,
I don't think a lot of people would care if they were pulling data and taking our information in some form that it's going to benefit us. The
mhm,
problem is that's not what's happening. You can look at different examples of this for like dynamic pricing. When companies are extracting our information. So, like, if you send a while back, there was a lawsuit that came out against Google that they were reading our emails. So, if you were telling someone that you are, you just got pregnant, then they are going to start extracting your information and they are going to start selling you baby products. They're going to start selling. And the thing is like a lot of people will say, well, once again, that's not that bad.
mm,
And if that was benefiting us, then to me, it would be okay. But the problem is they're using that information and more often than not, upping the prices on
yeah,
things that they know you're going to need. So they're extracting profit from you while extracting information. So I think it's if we were seeing something, if we were seeing some sort of benefits, if we were another example is like violence. If there was a mass surveillance system, then that was cutting down violence, that was cutting down something tangible, was we're having less deaths, less like in the United States, less shootings, then that would be something that I would be interested in. But the problem is that's not happening. So they're just extracting a ton of information from us
yeah,
to really not do anything beneficial. And I think that's the main thing is like people want to see good things happen. I really don't think people care so much about privacy as they do. They just want to have a good life.
very nice.
And to me, I don't think those 2 things are working together currently.
So this is
I
why,
think that they're taking all this information and we're not living a better life.
yeah. So you strongly believe that literacy, the digital literacy especially, it can, and in coming years as well, it can become a form of civic self-defense, isn't
Yeah, I would say it helps you one thing is it helps you save money. Like,
yeah.
if you understand.
That's a language people would understand.
For sure. I think and like I said, people wanna live a better life. People wanna okay, we have to work a lot. If we wanna work a lot, we want our money to go a certain way. We want to be able to take a vacation. We want to be able to do things. We want to be able to own a home, live comfortably to where we're not so stressed out that if we're one day or we're one month or one injury away from being in debt. It's like that is the goal of I think that a lot of people want to the world that people want to exist in.
Yeah.
And I think understanding the digital landscape can help you get there slightly. I mean, there's
Mhm.
still a lot of things that are out of your control, but I do think that it can help you game the system a tiny bit.
I think that's an important lesson, and especially coming from someone like you who knows or has been working in this space quite a lot. Okay, now let's come back to your platform, and because your platform is not just talking about the geopolitical crisis, and this is the best part. I feel it mobilizes or is mobilizing the humanitarian responses as well. So let's talk a bit about your Donation a Day initiative. And again, you have encouraged your viewers to contribute some kind of daily donation to crisis zones, which has transformed those passive looking or passive viewing of your content into active participation and some sort of global mutual aid, which is very difficult to do again. So where did that idea come from? Although it comes across as very simple, but how did you think about this? And where are you taking this forward?
So when I first started posting on TikTok, it was very close. I think I started in September of like 2023 or something. It was right before October 7th happened. And so when October 7th happened, I started just trying to learn, once again, educating myself about the history and what was going on. And I had had conversations around Palestine prior to this because I've had Muslim friends who were like really trying to explain what was going on over there. And so when all of that started to happen, I started to, I mean, it makes you feel very helpless. And I decided, I was like, okay, well, if people watch my content, then I can take the money from my content and send it. And I was like, it would be cool because a lot of people are struggling. And if I could use my platform to basically have a corporation or a company like TikTok pay me to then send money, all people really needed to pay was a little bit of their time.
Mm,
And so I started to do in the beginning, I was just like, I would get the money and then I would just donate it right away. And I was only doing a video. So like the first month, I think it was like $50. And then the next month was like $300. So I would get the money. I think you used to get paid on like the 14th or something. So I would get the money and then I would make one video, one large
mhm,
donation of like, okay, $350. I'm just going to put it to whatever organization. Could have been the World Food Organization or they're UNRWA before they got banned from Israel. And so like I started to do the one day, but then you really only get one shot. If you're donating one time with one video, people are only seeing you one time. So I was like, okay, well, let me just let me take the $300 and let me just donate every single day. And that way people can see, okay, every day he's donating a piece of his money. So the donation a day was just to give me more of an opportunity to get more eyes on donations.
mhm,
But the problem is as it went on is there was no place to donate. So
mm,
like in Gaza, they stripped everyone of the the ways that you were able to donate because they kept pulling different organizations out of Gaza. So like it became very hard to find a place to donate. And on top of that, TikTok, I mean, I don't know what happened. Like the money that was coming in, I think at one point I was donating like 15 to $2,000 a month, and
mhm,
then something happened, and I was only getting like $10 a month. So I mean, the thing is like at this point, there wasn't really anything there. I still don't really know. I mean, like where you can donate. You can donate to kind of like local families, but even that, the path, and I mean that's part of Israel's intention is to figure out
yeah.
how it makes it very hard to help people. So, but the idea was just kind of like the same thing, creating a coalition of people who want to help and figuring out how to make big business pay for it. And
Yeah.
that's really how that started for me.
I mean, if you've been in this space for a long time, of course, you know the optics, how it works. And I have been working with a few families and a couple of institutions as well, and I've been really trying to evolve in this space in terms of understand how this works. So you mentioned about the front end in terms of how, your intentions, in terms of making sure you make your time work, you make your audience in terms of contributing to what you're trying to do. But then have you had a chance to look at the other side, where I know stories and I know people in Gaza, again in West Bank as well, where donation goes through the big corporations, and donation goes, obviously everything is visible to Israeli network in terms of how it goes, and there are different ways and mechanisms where you send money. Again, crypto is one of them, obviously, in terms of the standard cash and standard bank account, which is very, very difficult to access these days. But have you seen any? Have you been to the other side? Have you seen what is happening to the kind of donation which is going in, whatever is reaching out to people out there?
Yeah, I also have people that I've been in contact with who live out there. I have a couple friends who have been involved in starting different donations or different ways that the money is spread, whether it be figuring out how to build a water container or figuring out how to buy water. I mean, part of the issue was money was becoming so scarce, so money prices were rising. I mean, as sad as it is, a form of capitalism, even in a place like Gaza, but I think the people figuring out the best way to get aid, I wouldn't say was my best effort.
Yeah,
People people would sometimes message me and say, "How do you know you're not getting scammed?"
yeah,
And I would tell them, "You don't."
yeah,
The thing is, for me, is I want to move with a sense of belief that people are trying to do the right thing.
yeah,
And if I donate $50 and somebody is in dire need and I donate $50 and it turns out I got scammed, I'm just trying to do the right thing.
yeah,
I can't let that's not going to change what I'm doing. Like I'll just okay, well, I'll figure out I'll do a better job next time
yeah,
and I'll figure out the people that really are in dire need. So like for me, I was just I just wanted to move with a sense of there are 100% people that need it. There are also 100% people that are scamming. And at some point, you just have to hope that you're doing the right thing.
yeah.
And I mean, that's as sad as it is, but that's kind of just the world we're existing in currently.
Yeah. And no, this is something which I've learned and I'm learning. This is a learning process, but I wanna know more about where are we with your initiative, in a sense? Have you got a vision for it, or do you think you would see as things turn out, in coming weeks, coming months, and where all this goes? Is there a vision around this?
For which part?
For donation a day, in terms of, or trying to channel it in a different format to
I
make
mean,
things happen.
for me, th- at this point, the money has dried up for me. Like, and I
Yeah.
think that's part of the situation with TikTok being bought out.
Mm,
When TikTok The real time I started to lose views and money and things like that was when TikTok first got banned last year, I think in January of 2025, right before Trump became president. Something changed in the algorithm then. And the other thing is about 2 years ago I also had a way better job. So was way more comfortable. I was making a lot more money than I am now. So like I was able to take, 500, sometimes I would donate $1,000 or something and it wouldn't really affect me. Now, $1,000 might break me. Like
yeah,
I'm in a way different place with the work that I'm doing now than I was back then. So I think that's the other thing. I do get partnership, or I wouldn't say I do. I've gotten like a couple partnerships, and usually when I get a partnership, and I make a video with a partner involved in the video, I donate a portion of whatever it is I'm talking about. So if I was talking about, Iran or something, I would donate to the people that are struggling in Iran, because I'm not really interested in turning people into a news cycle to monetize
Yeah.
off of them. So like I've always felt that way in terms of, like, if the news is covering something, it would be nice to see the money that they're making from the views and the eyes
Mm,
go towards the people that they're actually talking about.
yeah.
So I think that's my main initiative, is at some point I would like to become big enough to have more partners. Now I
Yeah.
think I'm a little bit dangerous to work with in terms of people pushing, they might not like what I'm talking about. But I think partnerships are a way for me to give back.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's a way for me to survive, but I've never taken a partnership and not given money back to the people I'm talking about.
I mean, I can say you are doing the right thing and you are not dangerous to work at all with. I can say that with certainty. We need more of you, Connor, in this world. Sticking to your work in terms of another thing which I've noticed in what you do, how you make your audience, like through that example you gave in terms of that fundraising, in terms of donation a day, you make that research process visible rather than talking about it in terms of finished goods or finished conclusion. So, do people become more, again, this is something very important, do people become more critical thinkers when they see how investigation or how you're doing that research? And in your so many things you talk about, have you had that real collaboration again in terms of how the audience have contributed to some of the insights or sources that you were going in one direction and suddenly you are now moving in a different direction because someone from the audience or someone from your platform has come and said, oh, this is where the story is, or this is what the heart of the matter is?
I wouldn't say somebody has changed a story for me, but I would say people have increased my, like, in terms of how I view the idea of liberation, or how I view the idea of resistance, or things, these different words and how that are very impactful in stories. I would say people have impacted how I view them, which also has an impact on how I tell them. So
Mhm.
I really don't get very many people. I would love for people to reach out to me and help me with the research process. I mean,
Mhm.
it takes long times that I would like to shorten up the time span.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm also, like, I will show articles, I will show clips, I will show all these different things, is because nobody should trust me.
Mm.
People, I don't trust the media. I am a person on the internet. I am a talking head. You should trust me as much as you can trust other people. But if I'm providing sources, I'm providing information, I would like to think it brings in a little bit more validity to my conversation.
Mhm.
So I think that is the most important part, is someone should look at me and just say, this is just another guy on the internet. But if I'm saying the United States government is doing this, and then I provide you an article and a video of the United States government saying they're doing this and then them doing it, I think it should say, okay, well, he showed me the first part of the video, maybe the second part of the video, what he's saying is also true. So I
Mhm.
think, like, I think it just provides that I'm not just coming on here making stuff up. Like, what I'm doing, I'm reading and I'm listening and I'm telling the story from that.
And that is a parallel I draw in my profession as well. You know how teaching has evolved over the years. I feel my role, or I feel the role of us as educators within the university, is to be the facilitators. And I say this very, very strongly, because our job is to open that door. We cannot cover everything. We cannot talk about everything. If we are able to bring that to the fore, which allows you to then say, look, this is part one, or this is the bit. Now you go on and do your bit, and that is what you do so effectively. But in terms of your work over and over again, and you've spoken about it, the historical event, which are linked to the political side of it. So whether you talk about going to Vietnam in terms of USA, Chile, you mentioned all the modern right-wing movements as well. So can you tell us something around the certain historical event which and why have they been so contested up until now? Again, if we could pick up 9/11 for that matter, which is heavily controversial. But why do you think there are certain things which are so controversial and which is prohibited in all corners? But then when you talk about it again, you get pushed down as well.
I think, are you talking about like people or the algorithm?
No, I'm talking about people. We are in the real world now.
Yeah, I would say, like, using the example of 9/11,
Hmm.
I can only go based off of my opinion and what I've seen and read and things like that. But it's a fear thing.
Mm.
9/11 shaped many people.
Yeah,
Is when you go back and you watch the clips, you witness what happened. It is scary. It
yeah,
is the way that it changed America
mm,
is something that is very hard for people to have context around. Like, this idea of this level of destruction having some sort of context or some sort of history that pushed it to that level is hard when we've been taught for so long that it was just this violent extremist group that wanted to take down America.
yeah,
But there's a left out conversation there of why. What
mm,
where people don't just aren't born to
yeah,
feel this way.
yeah,
And whether, the real that people will contest is who did 9/11. I'm not interested to I don't really I'm not interested to have that conversation. I'm more interested to have the conversation around how did we get there?
mm,
Why is it even believable that somebody would do that? And then it comes down to the idea of blowback. A lot of the situations that happen in the United States, especially from the Middle East, whether it be like terrorist attacks or anything, often come from blowback.
yeah,
Dominate the entire world and expect to feel protected in our own little land over here. And I think that's the other thing about education
mm,
is keeping understanding that to make sure that you are safe, you need to know what's happening in the world. And you need to know who's making your life more dangerous. And I think this is a very important conversation for people to be having because we can't live in a bubble.
yeah,
It's just not going to happen. People are going to burst our bubble. And I think, like, bringing this to like a political sense is understanding, like, are the United States, like, their right wing view, which has become more even a democratic view of immigration.
yeah,
Why is there a high level of immigration? Well, it's because the United States is ripping the world apart. It's like we talk about, we want to have less immigration.
yeah,
If we think that there are not going to be refugees and immigrants coming from Iran after what we're doing to their country, but we're not living in the real world. And to think that people we're killing families. If we think that some refugees that are growing up without their parents, mothers, brothers, sisters are not going to be angry at the people that killed them, once again, we have to live in the world that we're currently living in. And I think people need to know that to, like, push for different policies to protect themselves, push for different politicians.
mhm,
So I just think it's a matter of, like, it's so important to understand history. And I
yeah,
think, once again, the Iran conversation around right now, it's important to understand where this is heading, the direction that we're going. It's not good.
yeah. But the problem here is that we as human beings, at least I've been living in the United Kingdom for 17 years, and I see the same pattern emerging. It has become like an episode. So from Afghanistan to Iraq to Somalia to Syria. And again, I'm talking about post 9/11. We move from one to the other. without actually reflecting, without having that discussion in our space. And that adds to the whole problem because the general population, the general society isn't ready to have that conversation. And who's the driver there? So you spoke about the fear. Fear of what? Fear of, are we talking about our political system, the way it has shaped itself? Or I would say, are we also talking about the corporate world? Are we also talking about the fear of what we've gotten used to in our society? The products and the services, which has in a way enslaved us. So how do we break that nexus? Do you think storytelling is a way to do that, Bubble?
I think people have to have belief that change can actually happen.
Mm,
To me, the number one thing is having a system or a strong feeling that your life can actually be better. Without that, there's no reason to learn. There's no reason to do anything. If you can't believe in that the world, the system, the government can change your life for the better, you're not fighting for anything. And I think that's the main thing is there has to be an alternative, and like trying to educate and help people understand that there is an alternative. You have to push for it. It's not going to be easy, but I think the storytelling is hopefully a way to show that we are being robbed of that alternative by people that are in the billionaire class, in the Epstein class, in some of the worst people. And it could be here at home. And I think, like you were saying about the corporate aspect, is the reason why it's hard for people to see that is because it goes back to what I said earlier about life is hard. Life is hard right now.
mm,
And if you can't survive, if you can't, you're barely surviving, barely getting by, and you just want to go home, you want to have a nice dinner, you want to play some video games, you want to watch a movie, there's nothing wrong with that. Like
yeah.
that's okay. And the reason why people need sort of relief, they need to go home and decompress, is purely because of the system that once again we are existing in. They are forcing us to have a harder life to
Yeah.
make us so reliant on jobs that we are beholden to the masters. And I
Yes.
think it's what's the common saying of job insecurity for employees is job security for the corporation holders, for the people that own these companies. So like while we're all scared of being fired, they're living the dream of
Yeah.
raking in the profits off our work.
And it's getting more comfortable for them as we go with the products, with the services which they are creating based on the labor we have. Again, I think there's a very nice book. Again, this is based around Adam Smith's ideologies of economics. And again, it explains how this has taken years mechanization of how our labor is being utilized for the greater profit. Again, there's so many elements to this which we can explore. But then talking about us, talking about the people who are struggling, who are again navigating a very toxic terrain, a very hostile terrain. And we jump onto our social media as well, where we talk about where we look at the polarization, misinformation, look at what is happening in terms of Iran, where the national media is playing something else altogether, but we know something else is happening on the ground. You can be seen as an example, Connor, where you maintain your clarity, you maintain your integrity while operating inside a space which can amplify that sort of hostility as much as the truth itself. So what do you say to that? How does it help you clear that space in your head?
I would say it goes back to like an audience or people around me, people that look to me for support, people that look to me to spread a better message of a better world. And I think it definitely gives me a push.
Mhm.
I try not to focus too much on like being audience stolen, like where my world and my existence is based on an audience and how they perceive me.
Mhm.
But I do believe that helping people believe that there is a better world is something that is very valuable and is a way to be pushed. I think part of the entire conversation, I mean, to be honest, this entire conversation could be built around empathy. I
Mhm.
think being existing outside of yourself, I mean, like we could talk about history once again, it's how we got the protections or the workers' rights or the hours of work that we have nowadays are from people striking, people doing things that have pushed back against systems that we exist in that have provided us more often than not a better life. And I think that type of will, that type of belief that we can still do that is something that if more people had that belief, it would be an easier situation. So I think pushing people towards that we can actually push back against this system is something that I'm very much interested in. And I think it's a large part of why I would like to build a platform and try to build it up even more.
And that's why, Connor, you're a builder. And on this podcast, we talk a lot about people creating that system where, big institutions have failed and all sorts. And what you're building clearly isn't a company or a product as such. What I call is, you may agree to this, but we're talking about a narrative infrastructure, which needs collaboration, which needs all sorts of support. But do you see competing with the broader journalism or the broader information which is being put out there by the mainstream media, which again has lost so much of credibility? So is there a vision around there as well? And I'm sorry if I'm pushing you that way, but that infrastructure, and you can't do it alone. You just can't do it alone. You need allies, you need soldiers in a metaphorical way.
Maybe not a metaphorical way, too. I mean, I think having people on the ground that are helping you grow or helping you push a similar idea is very important. But I would say, like, the mainstream media is absolutely something I'm up against. I think about it probably every day that I'm battling them. And I would say it's probably when I get the most frustrated or when I get the most sense of that nothing is changing is when the mainstream media does the same thing it's been doing for 20, 50 years, pushing the same narratives, saying the same thing. And I think a large part of when I think about my platform is battling those narratives, battling what they say, listening to what they say and taking their information and doing research on it and say, okay, this is not what's happening. Let me put out what's actually happening. So I would say they are absolutely someone I am after. It's also like to understand the mainstream media is really there's not very many of them left. They are owned by like 4 or 5 people, and especially now. So I think and most of them are supporters of either right wing ideologies or military action, some sort of military industrial complex, or supporting Israel's expansion in the Middle East. I mean, there's not very much of a other talking points in terms of mainstream media here.
Yeah, yeah. And again, that's eating up most of that space. But again, what it has done is it has given a rise of new kind of public intellectual, which again, you go to the universities to be shaped by them, what sort of courses they're teaching or what sort of information they're giving you. Digital platforms these days, again, it is giving rise to a new kind of opportunity, a new kind of thinking, again, people who take those seriously. At the same time, it also has dangers, which your life would say in terms of how you are weaving them into as you go day in day out. But finally, in terms of my question, which I want to ask before I go into those shorter questions, if you look further ahead, 10 years, what do you hope audience will understand about what they see right now through your work?
I would say I want people to recognize that they have more power than they think. The
Mhm.
power of the masses is something that can absolutely change the world, that government officials, leaders of countries are beholden to the people that vote for them. And
Mhm.
we should do a better job that if they are not listening to their constituents and the people that are voting for them, then they should be removed. They should be not be able to exist in a government that we allow them to exist in. And I think now the question is, in 10 years, where will there still be some sort of semblance of a system that we've decided to abide by for, the existence of American democracy? I'm not sure. Now my hope is, yes, I want there to be a better system. I want there to be more information,
Mhm.
but I want there to be I want people to be protected in terms of the information that they're receiving, more protections. Like, if we're talking about a perfect world, I would like free healthcare, free education,
Yes.
better public transportation. There's a world out there that people can live comfortably, better protections of workers, unions, bring them more back. I mean, that's what I would like to see in 10 years.
Yeah. And that's not a lot, to be honest. You're not asking for a lot because there's plenty out there in terms of what can be done, in terms of the infrastructure and the wealth and the capital and, just the mechanized thinking which we have in and around us.
For sure. And I mean, it's one of the main reasons I've traveled is to see what's really out there. And if like when it comes to infrastructure, I've spent a month in China. If we could get that Chinese infrastructure here in the United States, everyone's lives would be better. I mean, people have no clue like the affordability and also I mean the way you can move inside that country is something that it's truly amazing. So I mean, I would like to see that, but once again, I mean, I think the real start of this is for people to believe that they have power.
Okay, and finally, my question to you would be, you want more of Riverwand in this world? What would be the advice you'd give them if they're doing this kind of work or if they want to start this kind of work?
Empathy.
Hmm.
I mean, I would say my biggest thing is having empathy for the people that live all throughout the world. If you can let yourself feel what other people have gone through, people will feel it in your work. You will see it. Will change the way that you also exist in the world. You will have better conversations, better relationships. I think it doesn't not everybody needs to be online talking about geopolitics and oligarchs. I think you can exist with a large amount of empathy and emotional awareness by in just your personal relationships. And I think that's the to me that's probably the first start.
Thank you for that, Connor. Now we're going to move into the quick fire. I've got very few, I think three of them. Just one word in terms of how you see it. Any book or thinker that has shaped you the way you understand power?
In terms of how I understand power,
Yes, or how you see it. Or
there is a book by Naomi Campbell. It's called like it's tough because there's a lot of like personal books that I've read that have helped me understand not so much history, but more maybe myself. I would
reflective
say,
that way.
yeah, there's one is called The Shock Doctrine. Sorry, Naomi Klein is who it's
Hmm.
written by.
Hmm.
Incredible book, will change the way you see capitalism. It's in how the money moves throughout the world, and it's a great book.
Yep.
So that's definitely up there for me. I would also say, which is a very entertaining book, but will help you understand like apartheid and things like that, is Trevor Noah's book called Born a Crime.
Hmm.
It's entertaining enough that like the average person can listen to it, and I mean, the storytelling is incredible. So I think it's funny, it's emotional, but it helps you understand how people grow up in these systems. So I mean, Born a Crime for beginners, like just to build out your idea of kind of how like to empathize with people. I would say
Hmm.
Born a Crime is a great place to start.
Thank you for sharing that. I think those are great examples. Now, the next one is one technology company which you think, based on your work, and again, we know Palantir, but one technology company which you think people should be paying more attention right now, wherever they are in the world.
OpenAI,
Mm-hmm.
the creators of ChatGPT. I think everybody knows who they are, but I believe that they are villains. I believe that they will capitulate and they will sacrifice any human rights or civilian rights, anything that you think you should have. I think they are willing to bypass that for power. And I mean, I would have to put Oracle. If you put those three together, I mean, those are holding up the entire US economy essentially. Like those, without those three companies, we live in a different world.
And they have tentacles all over. Like I said, NHS is one place where these companies are in. Getting in slowly, Oracle has been there. It's got a long history. Of course, Palantir. But thank you for sharing that again. My last question to you, and then we close off. And this is more for me. This is more for me to learn a new kind of work, a new kind of research. So share us a habit. Share with me a habit that keeps your research disciplined, especially when you're going down so deep into those rabbit holes and investigating some very, very difficult topics.
Yes, believing in ideological stances. So, like my convictions. My convictions will always be based around like understanding and supporting the oppressed. It could be the person who works at a McDonald's and their manager is oppressing them, or it could be the United States government providing money for Apple and like Apple going to different parts of Africa to mine cobalt. Like understanding that will always bring me back to kind of like supporting, in my opinion, the right side. And I think that's kind of like how your work should be built around is I want to be writing stories that help people. And I'm not saying that the oppressed people need me to save them. I think it's understanding that once again ideological convictions will help everyone. It's like there's a level of belief that if you benefit people throughout the world, it will come back to your country. And human rights abuses, all of these things will, if you don't stop them in other parts, they will come home.
I think that's a very subtle point to end this conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, Connor. Thank you so much for this. Thank you for your time. And on this, one of the ideas we often return on this podcast is the idea of builders. People who step into that system that feels broken, and then you try to construct something different. And then you try to rebuild community, that livelihood. And your work shows that it means building that understanding. The meaning, like I said at the start of it, in a world where information is moving so fast. So thank you for doing that work, Connor. Thoroughly a pleasure. And thank you for joining us today on Builders of the Broken Bazaar.
Of course, same to you. And I hope the audience can enjoy the conversation and take something away from it.